Welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. I'm Jason Timpf. Happy Thursday, everybody. We're going to be breaking down Bucks Celtics tonight. Yet another nationally televised, meaningful basketball game where we had stars sitting out, because that's another huge problem with the NBA. We'll get to that in a second. Not too much to take away from this specific game, as is always the case when you have such important players sit out. But there were two specific concepts that I wanted to hammer home really quick before we move on. One, I laid out in detail on Tuesday how the core flaw of the Milwaukee Bucks defense is their overhelping in the paint. They're one of the best paint defenses in the league, but they've done so at the expense of their ability to defend the three-point line. And an inferior Celtics team today that was playing with significantly less talent than Milwaukee was made 21 three-point shots. And a lot of them were fantastic looks, because that's what happens when you overhelp on drives and guys can make easy reads on kickouts to wide open shooters. Now, as is always the case, the Bucks eventually were able to clamp down on the final few possessions and get enough stops and get the win. That was to be expected. But this is an issue with the Bucks defense that they have to address, and they've shown no willingness to address. Like I showed you guys on Tuesday, just in the month of March, they're still fifth in the number of wide open threes that they give up every single game. That means that this issue that's plagued them all season is showing little to no signs of improvement. That's going to be my big concern with the Bucks going into this postseason run, is they are at risk of being shot out of a playoff series by a team that gets hot from three-point land. We've seen it happen before. It's absolutely something that can potentially happen. On to the Celtics. Obviously, nothing you could take away from tonight's game as it pertains to them as a playoff threat, obviously. Jayson Tatum is going to be the guy making most of their late game decisions, but I do think that the Celtics are an interesting microcosm of the difference between a good basketball team and a bad basketball team. It's from the top down. So let's start with the front office. When you are a well-run basketball team, you have more talent on the margins. More of your moves pan out. So when guys sit out for one reason or another, the product is just better with what you're bringing in to fill those roles. That credit goes to the general management, the front office of the Celtics, then to the coaching staff. When you have your group so bought in and so believing what you're asking them to do, that replacement players that come off the bench bring that same intensity and effort and focus to the scheme, which is a working scheme. The Celtics do a ton of switching. We've talked about it on the show. I've been so impressed by the Celtics all season, but them having success with their backups is yet another example of just how well run they are. And it's something that I hope that the Lakers can recapture at some point soon. I have a video, it may or may not be out at the time this video is out, but I have a video coming out about the Lakers coaching search, and this specifically is something that I think matters so much. A huge sign of what the coaching staff does and their ability to implement a scheme and their ability to get players to buy in is how the team looks when important players have to sit out, and the Celtics looked great. But those are the only two takeaways I had from that specific game on account of the fact that so many guys were out. I wanted to talk for a quick second about this idea of stars sitting out. So Adam Silver specifically mentioned it. We showed you a clip of my boss, Colin Cowherd, venting about it on his podcast the other day. I shared with you guys a little bit of my ideology behind shortening the season, but I wanted to hammer home an important detail of why I think this is such a common sense decision to make. So let's say, for instance, that a really good regular season NBA game, a game like that Sixers-Nets game about a month ago when Kyrie and KD went into Philly and just demoralized the Sixers. And Kyrie and KD are talking all sorts of trash, and they're just going at them. And Embiid is like rising to the occasion and fighting back, and Harden's like wilting away. It was amazing television. That game, I didn't see what the actual ratings were. Let's say it was, 3 million. That's usually what like a really good NBA regular season game will get. That game, if that was what happened in the majority of NBA regular season games, you could build real momentum. The problem is that's the outlier. You can't point to maybe one or two games since that Philly Brooklyn game that brought that level of intensity. So as a result, there is not a momentum in the NBA's ability to bring on casual fans. The NBA has to think bigger. No, you're never going to be the NFL. The NFL is too big, and it relates. The American population relates so well to NFL football. Yeah, it's for whatever reason, it's just America's game, right? We can all agree to that. But the gap doesn't have to be this big. The NBA is capable of gathering a bigger foothold in this country. The problem is we struggle, the NBA does, bringing on casual fans. The reason why is will I enjoy a game like tonight between a shell of the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks? Yeah, but I'm a diehard basketball fan. I live and breathe the game of basketball every day of my life. So I can watch Marcus Smart playing awesome driving kick basketball and I will get a kick out of that. But casual fans may not. Casual fans will love that Brooklyn-Philly game. So in order to build the proper momentum to get casual fans to keep coming back to the game of basketball, you have to have all your national, or at least the majority of your national TV games feeling more urgency with the best players on the floor. Look at what happened with Milwaukee tonight. They played down to Boston. That actively hurts the product. The product will be better when there's more urgency and the best players are on the floor. And the only way to do that is shorten the season. And in terms of math, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for NBA regular season games that are nationally televised to eventually get 10 million viewers every single time. I think that's possible. That is an achievable goal. But the only way that happens is if you build that urgency and keep the quality, the product as high quality and high intensity as possible. And so that's where you have to lose the short-sighted vision of if we cut games, it's going to cut into our paychecks. What if you could go to the media companies in 10 years or 5, or whenever the next time it is that they negotiate a TV deal and say, we're getting 10 million viewers in these nationally televised games? There's no way in the world that they couldn't make up for whatever the drop-off is in total game volume if the quality is better. Look at the revenue that the NFL generates with such a short regular season. That has to be the goal. It has to be done. I'm not optimistic about it. It doesn't affect me personally because I'm just a fan of the game. I'm such a big fan that I'm not going anywhere. The NBA could get actively worse for the next 5 years, and I'm still going to support the league because I'm that type of fan. I'm not the one they have to worry about. It's the casual fans out there, and they've got to get that part figured out. One last note before we get out of here tonight. I think Giannis deserves to win MVP. I've tried as hard as I can to consider Jokic. I haven't met number 2. My final list is going to be Jayson Tatum at 5. I had Tatum past Ja Morant and Devin Booker. I just thought he was a better basketball player this year and did more for his specific situation. I have Luka Doncic at 4, Embiid at 3, Jokic at 2, and Giannis at 1. The thing with Jokic, and like I try to stay consistent with my criteria. Who's the best player on the best team in the league? Who's the best player in the league? And who's the most valuable player in the league? Jokic is the most valuable player in the league. There's no question. If that was the way that award is given out, but we don't do it that way, right? It's the other 2 categories where Jokic has lost ground for me. Specifically, he's not the best player in the best team in the league. The Nuggets are nowhere near good enough, and they've been tailing off. But he was claimed by many to be potentially the best player in the league. And I considered him in that conversation, but the more I've watched him, I drop him down into that second tier. And the reason why is, yes, Jokic's first punch is as good as any first punch in the league. He is an unbelievable offensive weapon. He puts you in so many conundrums in how you have to guard him because he's such a dominant low-post offensive player and because he has the ability to stretch the floor, and if you send any help his way, he can pick you apart. I get all of that. That's why he's in that second tier. But I'm starting to see the flaws. When he faces really long and athletic teams, his ability to operate in that tight space environment does get limited. I saw tons of that over the course of the last couple of months. His foot speed is an actual issue. You can run him off the floor in transition. In the half court, He's a drop coverage big, which, yes, is very functional in the day in, day out grind of the regular season, but it's nowhere near as valuable in a postseason environment. And I saw teams specifically attack that within this regular season this year. So yes, he was the most valuable player in the league by the purest definition of value. But he's nowhere near the best player of the league, in my opinion, and he wasn't on a good enough team. So for me, I'm dropping him down to number 2, and I'm going with Giannis. Guys, like, I don't think Giannis is the best playoff player in the world. I have him 3rd behind KD and LeBron. But he is unquestionably the best regular season player in the NBA, and he had the best regular season this year in his day in, day out impact. Even all those defensive problems that I've been telling you guys about. Look up the Bucks defense with Giannis on the floor. It's great. And a lot of that has to do with him only playing in the low 30s of minutes every game. Giannis is the best player in the league in the regular season and a top 3 player in the postseason. Jokic is neither of those things. The Bucks are a better basketball team as well. And Giannis is every bit as valuable. Look at the on-off numbers. Look at how the Bucks play when Giannis is off the floor versus when he's off the floor. I laid those out in detail when I went over the MVP case last week. Yeah, I understand we get burnt out on this stuff. I understand we get excited by what's new. And Jokic isn't even that new. He won the MVP last year. But Giannis is the better player. Giannis had a better season. Yes, it's extremely impressive what Jokic did with a bad team. That's why he's going to finish 2nd. But Giannis is the MVP. It's such a clear and obvious decision to me. And that's where I'm going to go. That would be my vote if I had one. All right, guys, that is all I have for tonight. Like I said earlier, I will be out of town for the next 4 days for my brother's wedding. But we will be back next week on Tuesday for what's going to be an amazing playoff run. As always, I appreciate your guys' support, and I will see you next week.